Aaron, can you tell me about the RBC Dominion Securities Bullion Program?
I'd love to talk about the bullion program. Before we get into the details of it, though, I'd like to specifically outline that we are separate from the Royal Bank of Canada's bullion program and RBC Direct Investing. RBC Dominion Securities is owned by the Royal Bank of Canada, but we're a separate entity and a separate business under the RBC Wealth Management division. And we have an independent program from the other entities of the organization. So it's possible that other areas of the organization have abilities and characteristics in their program that are different from ours. So let's remember in the discussion today that we're talking about the Dominion Securities program specifically.
And are we talking about physical gold? You being allocated gold?
Yeah, so our program is known as an allocated bullion program. And the key factor here is that the bullion is segregated from the bullion of other clients, and it's segregated from the assets of RBC as an entity. You specifically own specific bars in your investment account, and those are your bars, even though they sit in an investment account at our organization.
And is there costs associated with allocated gold?
Yeah, so one of the challenges with allocated gold is it's sort of a bulky process. You have to own specific bars, and a bar of gold is quite a large transaction. So the minimums can be somewhat high for some people's idea of what a large gold transaction might be. And the costs can be high because as soon as you're dealing in a physical commodity, you're dealing in the real world. And these are bars that exist and they have to be moved around and stored. And so there are a few costs associated with these transactions, and there's also these fairly high minimums. Would you like me to break down those costs?
Yeah, I would like to know what's what fees are associated with this.
Okay. So there's sort of 4 layers of fees related to owning physical bullion. So this is not something you want to transact in as like a trader. We're not trading on a daily basis. You're going to own it and keep it in your account as an inflation hedge or diversifier for your portfolio, because you need to overcome these costs to justify the long-term ownership. So the first cost you have is the cost of actually transacting in the sort of institutional bullion market. So we call a desk. It's an institutional desk. Often they're dealing with other banks and other corporations, and then we transact there and we ask them for a price, and there's a bid-offer spread. And the bid-offer spread is the difference between the price to buy and the price to sell. So the price to sell is lower than the price to buy, and the bid-offer spread, we usually talk about the width of the spread. The width of the spread is a good estimate is $10, but it can vary depending on market conditions and liquidity events and whatnot. But $10 is a good estimate of that. And the spot price is typically considered the middle of the bid and offer spread. In addition to that, we have something called the minting fee. Okay, the minting fee is the amount it costs to create the bar. Now, there's obviously bars in inventory, and not every single time you buy bullion, you're buying a bar that's being created unique for you. But traditionally in the bullion markets, when you buy bars, you pay a minting fee, and that minting fee varies depending on the denomination that you're transacting in. So in the case of coins, they transact usually in 50-ounce boxes of 1-ounce coins. That cost is $50 per ounce. For a kilo bar, it's $6 per ounce, and the minimum transaction size there is 2 kilos. And there's 400-ounce bars, and the minting fee there is $2 per ounce. Now these minting fees can change without notice and dependent on factors such as how tight the bullion market is at any given time. But as of January of 2026, these are the costs to mint the bar. Then you have storage costs, and our program is facilitated through the Royal Canadian Mint, and they charge storage fees for us to store bullion on the RBC shelf at the mint, and that is 13 cents per ounce per month plus HST. So that accumulates every month, and that's sort of a pass-through from the mint. All of these costs, these first three costs, are before your advisor, your investment advisor, who is ever transacting in your account, is compensated. So there, in addition to this, would be either a commission or a fee, and that amount or that price would be related to your overall relationship with that individual, whether you have other wealth management needs, and maybe you have your stocks and bonds or your portfolio there, maybe you're doing other wealth management strategy with that person, or maybe it's a transaction you want to do, in which case it would likely be a commission, but that needs to be negotiated based on the nature of the transaction you want to execute in the context of the rest of your relationship.
So what would be the minimum requirement for me to participate in the allocated gold program?
So in allocated bullion, you have to be a client of Dominion Securities or become a client, and you need to meet the minimum threshold to transact in the institutional bullion space, which is 50 ounces if we're talking about coins, because they come in 50-ounce boxes, 2 kilos if we're talking about kilo bars, you need at least 2, or a 400-ounce variable weight bullion bar. So those can be big numbers when you calculate the current price of gold bullion. It's not an easy thing to transact in smaller amounts. It's not possible.
Now, if I didn't want to buy physical gold or allocated gold, is there another way that I can participate in gold?
So there's allocated gold in our program, and then there's non-allocated gold. And non-allocated gold applies to the various solutions where you're involved in a bullion pool. So usually exchange-traded funds are this format, where you own bullion with a lot of other investors. Or the other common solution is a certificate, a bullion certificate. And a certificate is just an IOU. So if RBC sells you a gold bullion certificate, we can sell it in smaller denominations. And that bullion certificate can be converted into bullion, provided you meet the minimum thresholds to that I just discussed earlier. So often the certificate can be a better solution for smaller transactions and faster transactions. It's less costly. There's also no storage costs related to a certificate. But for some people, not having that segregation is an important detail. And if you want that segregation, you need to move into a allocated gold solution.
And would I be able to take delivery of my gold? And where does the gold actually sit?
So in our program, we've made the decision not to facilitate delivery or receipt of physical bullion. Because when you're dealing with physical bullion, there's a lot of other elements that come into play in terms of taking in bullion from the outside world as soon as it's left a financial institution. We don't really know where it came from. So that complicates things a lot. And delivering bullion, dealing with physical delivery of bullion is a complicated and logistically challenging thing, which is also costly. So we don't provide that. We do not break the chain of custody. So we can transfer your bullion to another bullion dealer, or we can take transfer of, like, for example, stock certificates. But our bullion program is best if it's just contained in, where we make the transaction for you and you hold it with us, and then we will, if you want to sell it for you. You would receive a bar list that gives you the serial numbers of your specific bars. And in the case of larger holdings, we're not likely to do this for 2 kilo position, but for larger holdings, we can facilitate audit visits. And this is sort of what ensures that the certainty that if we go down to the mint and we schedule an audit visit, you can go down and compare your serial numbers to the actual bars, but the bars are going to remain there on the RBC shelf at the Royal Canadian Mint.
Okay, so I hold the gold, and can I borrow against it?
So yeah, we can normally facilitate borrowing depending on the account type it's in. Essentially, it falls into the margin system, and the loan to value against bullion is typically 75%, if you have a non-registered margin account. That's a much larger topic because there's a lot of nuance to margin accounts and borrowing that we would need a longer conversation to talk about, but we'll cover that in a subsequent video.